In the chill of a Boston winter in 1876, under skies heavy with secrets and the faint glow of gaslight, the city stood as a monument to industry and hope. Yet beneath its cobblestone streets lay stories of sorrow and solitude. The cold was not merely an element of nature. It was a presence that seeped into every brick and beam, whispering tales of forgotten dreams. As the icy wind danced through narrow alleyways and over the frost-laden storefronts, it carried with it the murmurs of lives caught in the relentless grip of fate. Amidst this sprawling urban landscape lived Sarah Wilkins, a young woman whose eyes bore the weight of loss and whose soul was etched with scars of the past. Sarah's life had been a relentless series of hardships: the bitter taste of grief following the passing of her beloved parents, the collapse of the only home she had ever known, and the disheartening isolation that came from wandering the unforgiving streets of Boston. For Sarah, every step was a reminder of what had been lost, a life that once shimmered with promise, now dimmed by sorrow. Under the muted luminescence of a hazy night, Boston transformed into a world of stark contrasts. The towering, historic buildings, their facades softened by the perpetual fog of industry, stood as silent sentinels to the relentless march of time, their outlines, etched against a sky mottled with the pale remnants of sunset, seemed to guard secrets that only the night could reveal. In these moments, as the city exhaled its cold breath, Sarah's loneliness deepened. The city's grandeur became a prison of memories, a constant reminder of a past filled with warmth and belonging that was now irretrievably gone. Yet, amid the pervasive gloom, the spirit of the American frontier began to stir in whispers from afar. Beyond the confines of Boston's narrow streets and the clamor of its industrial heartbeat lay a vast, untamed expanse, an invitation to a different kind of existence. The West beckoned with promises of open skies and endless possibilities, where the horizon was not a boundary but a gateway to dreams unbound. The stark contrast between the suffocating confines of city life and the majestic, sweeping plains of the West painted a picture of hope that was as alluring as it was mysterious. Sarah's nights were often spent beneath the indifferent glow of street lamps, where the cold and her solitude intertwined in a delicate dance of despair and longing. In these silent hours, the haunting beauty of Boston revealed itself in unexpected ways. A lone figure shrouded in a threadbare coat, her eyes glistening with unshed tears as she passed by shuttered windows, each one a portal to lives filled with laughter and light. The contrast was painfully vivid. While the city pulsed with the energy of countless souls, Sarah's existence seemed suspended in a quiet void of isolation, a solitary beacon amid a sea of anonymous faces. In her heart, Sarah nurtured a yearning for change, a desperate wish to break free from the chains of her past and the stifling weight of her present. The streets of Boston, with their echoing footsteps and whispered regrets, had become a labyrinth of memories too heavy to bear. Every corner held a fragment of the life she once knew, every shadow a reminder of love lost and opportunities squandered. And yet, as she walked those familiar paths, an ember of hope began to glow faintly, as if the very air around her was conspiring to tell her that a new beginning was possible. The cinematic quality of this narrative world was unmistakable. Imagine the scene: the camera slowly panning across a frost-covered Boston street, each detail meticulously framed, the intricate ironwork of a street lamp, the soft, diffused light casting long, melancholic shadows, and the solitary figure of Sarah, moving with quiet determination through the urban night. In this visual tapestry, the city's concrete and steel were rendered almost ethereal, their rigidity softened by the ephemeral touch of winter's breath. It was a moment caught between reality and reverie, a frame that spoke of both despair and the hint of liberation. As the narrative unfolds, the viewer is drawn into a journey that promises not only a geographical transition, but also an emotional metamorphosis. Boston, with all its historical gravitas and relentless pace, stands as the backdrop to Sarah's initial struggle, a struggle that is both deeply personal and universally resonant. Here, in the heart of a city that never truly sleeps, she confronts the stark reality of her own existence. Every step on the icy pavement echoes with the memories of a once vibrant life, now faded into the chill of night. The camera lingers on. Her face, a visage marked by grief and resilience, eyes that flicker with the remnants of a spark long thought extinguished. Yet, as the narrative begins to shift, so too does the scenery. The frame slowly widens, and the tightly knit urban grid gives way to the vast, uncharted wilderness of the American West. The transition is seamless, a visual metaphor for Sarah's internal journey. Where once there was the confining embrace of Boston's narrow lanes, there now unfolds a panorama of boundless skies and rugged landscapes. Majestic mountains rise in the distance, their peaks crowned by clouds that seem to celebrate the promise of a new day. Rolling prairies and wildflower-dotted meadows stretch out before her, inviting her to leave behind the shadows of her past. In this cinematic reimagining, the viewer is treated to a feast of visual splendor. The transition from the dark, claustrophobic alleys of Boston to the expansive, sun-dappled vistas of the West is not merely a change of setting, it is a powerful symbol of rebirth. It speaks to the possibility of renewal and transformation, the idea that even the deepest wounds can heal when given the chance to bask in the light of a fresh start. For Sarah, the journey is as much about leaving behind the physical remnants of her past as it is about shedding the emotional burdens that have long weighed her down. Here, in the wild embrace of the West, the cinematography becomes a character in its own right. The natural beauty of the landscape, with its rugged terrain and endless horizons, is rendered in vivid, painterly strokes. The warm hues of a setting sun bleed into the cool blues of an approaching twilight, creating a palette that is both haunting and hopeful. The gentle rustle of the wind through tall grasses, the distant call of an eagle soaring high above, each sound and sight is carefully orchestrated to evoke a sense of wonder and possibility. It is within this boundless expanse that Sarah's heart begins to stir, whispering of a future where the cold, unyielding grip of her past might finally thaw. As the narrative voice guides us through these sweeping transitions, the language itself adopts a lyrical, almost musical quality. Phrases are carefully chosen to evoke not just images, but emotions, each sentence a brushstroke on the canvas of Sarah's unfolding destiny. The reader is invited to experience not just the stark realities of a bygone era, but the ineffable beauty of a world on the brink of transformation. In every carefully composed shot, in every lingering moment of silence punctuated by the soft hum of a piano, there is a promise that even in the deepest winter, the seeds of spring lie hidden, waiting to burst forth in radiant, life-affirming bloom. This opening serves not only as an introduction to the setting and the protagonist, but as a stirring call to embark on a journey from the cold, isolating corridors of a city marked by loss to the warm, expansive embrace of a land where hope and possibility reign supreme. It is a call to witness the metamorphosis of a spirit once shackled by despair, as it dares to dream of a life reimagined amidst the vast, untamed beauty of the West. In the flickering light of Boston's gaslit streets, Sarah Wilkins may have seemed small and inconsequential, a solitary figure lost in the indifferent tide of urban life. Yet within her lay a reservoir of strength, a defiant ember of hope that refused to be extinguished by the bitter winds of misfortune. Her eyes, though clouded by grief, shimmered with the quiet promise of renewal. And as the camera pans out to reveal the endless frontier beyond, it becomes clear that her story is not one of resignation, but of rebirth. A transformation as dramatic and moving as the landscapes that now unfold before her. This is the moment where Sarah's journey begins, a poignant threshold between a past filled with sorrow and a future brimming with untold possibilities. With every word spoken and every image painted by the narrator's voice, The viewer is drawn into a world where the boundaries between despair and hope blur, and where the promise of a new life beckons from just beyond the horizon. The stage is set. The characters are poised for transformation, and the cinematic narrative unfolds, a tale of loss, of longing, and ultimately, of the indomitable spirit of a young woman ready to embrace the call of the Wild West and forge a new destiny from the ashes of her past. The early morning light, soft and uncertain, crept over the cold pavement of Boston as Sarah trudged through another day that mirrored the endless winter of her heart. Her thoughts were heavy with memories of loss and the dismal monotony of her existence, when suddenly an unexpected glimmer of curiosity stirred within her, while browsing through a stack of newspapers at a cramped corner newsstand, one she passed by daily without much thought. Her eyes caught a headline that made her pause. It was the Matrimonial Times, a publication not known for its glamour, but for the candid, sometimes even crude portrayal of those seeking love. Yet, in that moment, amid the faded ink and worn paper, something stirred in Sarah. Her gaze lingered on the printed words. Seeking true love, a gentle soul in search of a partner to share life's journey. The ad, simple yet resonant, described a man of honest means and sincere intentions. It was not wrapped in the customary embellishments of a fairy tale, but there was an authenticity to it that caught Sarah's attention. In a flash, the banal routine of her life was interrupted by a sudden questioning of her own possibility for love. For years, her heart had been resigned to sorrow, convinced that life in the bustling, indifferent streets of Boston had chewed up every hope she once nurtured. But now, in the quiet hum of a new day, the simple ad presented a possibility that she had long forgotten. A possibility that perhaps love could be real, raw, and transformative. The very thought sparked an internal conflict within her. As she stood there, holding the newspaper with trembling fingers, a battle raged inside. Part of her recoiled, burdened by the relentless disappointment of past failures and the pervasive isolation that had defined her recent years. Memories of missed opportunities and bitter rejections flooded her mind. Yet, at the same time, another part of her, fragile yet defiant, felt a small flame of hope flicker to life. It was as if the ink on the page had whispered a secret promise, that the world was not entirely devoid of kindness, that somewhere, somehow, a connection could be forged to heal the aching void within her. That morning, Sarah found herself standing a little longer than usual by the newsstand. The chill in the air seemed to pause around her, as if even the wind recognized the weight of this moment. The crispness of the paper beneath her fingertips became a tactile reminder of the possibility of change. It was a moment both delicate and electrifying. A pause in her routine where the seed of hope was sown amidst the grime of everyday life. That evening, with the newspaper folded carefully and tucked away in the crevice of her worn bag, Sarah returned to her modest room. The space was sparse, the furniture as weathered as her own spirit, yet the simple act of reading that ad ignited something new. As she sat by the dim light of a single lamp, her eyes scanned the faded pages once more, absorbing every word. She began to imagine what it would be like to reach out, to pen her own response, to cast her lonely heart into the vast ocean of possibility that was the world of letters. The idea of writing to a stranger was both exhilarating and terrifying. Her heart pounded as she envisioned the delicate process of correspondence. In the quiet hours of the night, the ink on paper would become the vessel carrying her dreams, her fears, and her silent desires. With each word, she could reveal a fragment of her soul, fragile yet yearning to be understood. The prospect of sharing her truth with someone, even if it was just through carefully crafted letters, began to dissolve the heavy layers of despair that had long defined her days. Sarah's internal turmoil was palpable in those moments. She recalled the many nights she had spent beneath the indifferent glow of streetlights, her eyes glistening with tears that reflected the moon's sorrowful shine. Yet now, as she stared at the blank page before her, there was a spark, a daring, defiance against the relentless gloom. She hesitated for only a moment before picking up her pen, its nib scratching lightly against the coarse paper. The sound, soft yet resolute, was like a whisper of destiny, urging her to take that first tentative step into a new world. The act of writing was not immediate perfection, but a gradual process of rediscovery. Sarah began by jotting down simple thoughts, fragments of her long-suppressed memories, and tentative dreams. She wrote about the loss that had fractured her world, the haunting solitude that had become her constant companion, and the flicker of longing that now danced precariously in her heart. With each sentence, she felt the icy grip of despair loosen, replaced by an ember of possibility. It was as if the very act of putting pen to paper was a rebellion, a declaration that despite all the darkness, she still believed in the promise of tomorrow. In the following days, Sarah found herself drawn to the ritual of writing. Each morning, as the city slowly awakened and the relentless hum of Boston began its daily symphony, she would return to that quiet corner of her room. With the matrimonial Times ad as her muse, she carefully crafted her own letter, honest, raw, and unembellished. She described her life not with the florid language of a romance novel, but with the authentic simplicity of someone who had known both profound loss and fleeting joy. Her words carried the weight of her experiences, yet there was a tenderness in them, a subtle invitation to another soul who might understand the depth of her longing. As days turned into weeks, a steady exchange of letters began. The initial responses were tentative, cautious acknowledgments that blossomed into earnest dialogues. Through the written word, Sarah found herself conversing with a kindred spirit, a person whose life, though equally marked by hardships, resonated with the same quiet hope. The letters became a bridge between the past and the future, a channel through which old wounds could begin to heal. Each envelope that arrived carried not only words, but a promise that perhaps, in the vast tapestry of life, their paths were meant to cross. In these moments of intimate correspondence, Sarah rediscovered a long-forgotten aspect of herself. The act of sharing her innermost thoughts, of revealing her vulnerabilities on paper, was both cathartic and transformative. The initial trepidation gave way to a growing anticipation. She began to look forward to the arrival of each letter with the eagerness of a child awaiting a secret gift. The careful choice of words, the artful crafting of sentences, and the delicate balance between sorrow and hope in each correspondence ignited a passion within her, a passion for life that had lain dormant for far too long. The process was gradual but powerful. With every letter exchanged, the dark veil that had shrouded Sarah's heart lifted a little more. She no longer saw herself as a lost soul, condemned to wander the cold streets of Boston. Instead, she began to envision a future where she could embrace the possibility of love and renewal. The once overwhelming loneliness was slowly being replaced by a gentle curiosity about the world beyond her familiar confines. The act of writing, of sharing her truth, had set in motion a chain reaction, a series of moments that whispered of a destiny not yet written. Sarah's transformation was as much internal as it was evident in her words. The letters, with their careful cadence and emotional resonance, became a mirror, reflecting her own resilience. In each carefully penned reply, she discovered the strength to hope again, the courage to believe in a future where the past did not dictate her destiny. The world of correspondence was no longer just a realm of formal words and distant strangers. It was a sanctuary, a place where her spirit could soar free, unburdened by the weight of solitude. As the exchange deepened, the language in her letters grew richer, more vivid. She began to describe the stark beauty of Boston, not as a backdrop of despair, but as a reminder of her journey, a journey that had led her from the cold, indifferent streets to the tantalizing prospect of a new beginning. The narrative of her life started to shift from one of bitter resignation to a tale of rebirth and possibility. Every word she wrote was imbued with a subtle defiance, a quiet insistence that, despite the scars of the past, she was ready to embrace the future with open arms. The cinematic quality of these exchanges was undeniable. In her letters, Sarah painted pictures with words, images of foggy mornings, the soft glimmer of streetlights reflecting on rain-soaked pavements, and the vibrant, untamed promise of the American frontier that lay just beyond the horizon. The contrast between the oppressive gloom of Boston and the boundless, sunlit promise of the West was articulated with a clarity that made her correspondence almost tangible. It was as if each letter was a scene in a film, carefully directed, to evoke emotions that transcended the limitations of ink and paper. This newfound connection, this delicate interplay of hope and longing, marked a pivotal moment in Sarah's journey. It was the first true sign that perhaps, in the vast expanse of life's uncertainties, there lay a path toward healing, a path lit by the gentle glow of human connection. The act of reading and writing letters became a ritual of transformation, an intimate dialogue that steadily mended the fractured pieces of her soul. With every exchanged word, the once impenetrable wall of despair began to crumble, replaced by the tender architecture of hope and possibility. In the quiet solitude of her room, surrounded by the soft rustle of paper and the distant hum of a city awakening, Sarah felt the stirring of a future she had only dared to dream of, a future where love was not an elusive myth, but a tangible, ever-present reality. The Matrimonial Times ad, with its humble invitation, had unlocked something within her, the courage to step out of the shadows and embrace the uncertain promise of tomorrow. And as the pages of her life turned, she knew that every letter, every word written, was a step toward a destiny that held the promise of healing, renewal, and ultimately, the kind of love that could transform even the coldest of winters into a season of warmth and light. Thus, in the tender interplay between hope and despair, Sarah's journey into the world of correspondence became a quiet revolution, a testament to the resilience of the human spirit and its endless capacity for renewal. The simple act of reading an advertisement had ignited a spark that promised to lead her out of the darkness of Boston's lonely streets and into a life where every sunrise carried the promise of new beginnings. And with each letter that arrived, the future, once so bleak, began to shimmer with the iridescent hues of hope, inviting her to step forward into a destiny reimagined, where love and possibility intertwined to create a narrative as profound and beautiful as the vast, untamed West waiting just beyond the horizon. Out on the vast, windswept plains of the West, where the horizon stretches endlessly under a sky that seems to hold both promise and mystery, the world was a canvas painted with rugged beauty and harsh realities. It was in this sprawling frontier that the Dean family had carved out their existence, a family whose life was as intricate and vibrant as the landscape itself. The Dean homestead was more than just a cluster of weathered log cabins and modest barns. It was a living, breathing community. Here, the rhythm of life was dictated by the rising and setting of the sun, the ebb and flow of cattle drives, and the constant interplay of hard work and family loyalty. Each member of the family brought their own flavor to this mosaic of Western life. There were brothers who, despite their rugged exterior, shared tender moments and whispered secrets over the din of daily chores. Sisters who, with warm smiles and gentle words, mended not only broken fences, but also bruised hearts. And amid this close-knit tapestry, there also simmered undercurrents of conflict, a clash of wills, ambitions, and personal dreams that, like the unpredictable weather of the West, could change in an instant. At the heart of this family was Tom Dean, a man whose presence commanded both respect and curiosity. Tall and broad-shouldered, with eyes that reflected the steady resolve of one who had weathered many storms, Tom was not just a pillar of strength, but also the embodiment of the unyielding spirit of the West. His hands bore the calluses of a life spent working the land, yet there was a gentleness in his gaze when he spoke of dreams and hopes. For many in the town, he was known as the dependable elder brother, the one who shouldered the responsibilities of the homestead with unwavering dedication. But to Sarah, whose correspondence had slowly begun to reshape her solitary world, Tom was something more. A distant yet intriguing figure whose words carried the warmth and depth of a new beginning. It began with a single, unassuming letter. One crisp morning, as the first golden rays of sunlight broke over the wide-open prairies, Sarah received a letter embossed with a faded seal. The handwriting was firm and assured, and as she unfolded the paper, she discovered that it was from Tom Dean. In his words, she sensed a sincerity that transcended the rough exterior he was reputed to have. Tom wrote of long days spent tending to cattle, of the quiet moments when he'd stand alone on the porch and watch the sun sink below, the endless plains, a moment of solitude that somehow echoed Sarah's own. His language was simple yet evocative, capturing both the harshness and the beauty of a life lived in the raw embrace of the West. In his first letter, Tom described his daily rituals. The early mornings when the dew still clung to the grass, the long afternoons under a relentless sun, and the nights when the only light came from the stars and the occasional flicker of oil lamps in distant cabins. He spoke of the family with a mixture of pride and wistfulness, hinting at underlying tensions and unspoken regrets that punctuated their everyday interactions. There were moments of quiet intimacy, shared glances between siblings that conveyed volumes without a single word, yet also the unmistakable strain of rivalry and the burden of unfulfilled expectations. For Sarah, these letters were a revelation. Here was a man who, despite living a life that was so physically demanding and seemingly void of the comforts that she had known in the city, still managed to nurture a deep sense of hope and longing. With each carefully penned line, Tom offered her a window into a world that was both alien and alluring, a world where hardship was met with resilience, and every setback was a prelude to a new chapter of determination. The Dean family's life, as revealed in Tom's correspondence, was a study in contrasts. Their days were filled with the ceaseless demands of ranch work, a symphony of clanging tools, barking livestock, and the steady murmur of labor. But there was also an undercurrent of familial warmth that pervaded even the most trying moments. Tom described long, shared meals at the rustic dining table, where laughter and teasing were as much a part of the conversation as the serious business of managing the ranch. Yet, beneath the surface, there were hints of discord. The unspoken rivalry between brothers over who would inherit a greater share of the land, the subtle glances exchanged between sisters when one's ambition threatened to outshine the other, and the silent acceptance of burdens that no one dared to voice. In one particularly evocative letter, Tom recounted an evening when the family gathered on the creaking porch, the sky above a riot of twilight hues. As they sat in companionable silence, each member lost in their own thoughts, the conversation turned unexpectedly to dreams of the future. "There's a fire in each of us," Tom had written, "a longing for something beyond the endless horizon. I often wonder if our struggles are but the preludes to a destiny we have yet to claim." It was a moment of vulnerability that resonated deeply with Sarah, stirring within her a feeling that perhaps her own life, too, was on the brink of transformation. As the letters continued, the exchange between Sarah and Tom grew more frequent and increasingly personal. Their words began to weave a tapestry of shared experiences and mutual understanding. Sarah learned of the Dean family's traditions, of how they celebrated birthdays with simple feasts under starlit skies, and how, in times of hardship, they leaned on each other with a strength born of necessity. She read about the quiet moments of reflection that Tom cherished, the solitary walks along the rugged trails, the meditative silence of a sunset viewed from the edge of a boundless prairie, and the unspoken promise that every new day carried the possibility of renewal. In turn, Sarah's letters unveiled the layers of her own heart, a heart that had long been shrouded in the loneliness of Boston's unforgiving streets. She spoke of the bitter memories of loss, of nights spent wandering through dimly lit alleys in search of solace, and of the haunting echoes of a past that refused to fade. Yet, she also revealed a delicate hope, a tentative belief that even in the midst of despair, there was a spark waiting to be fanned into flame. With every word, she allowed herself to be vulnerable, to expose the raw edges of her pain in the hope that someone, somewhere, might understand. There was a moment when Sarah confessed, almost in a whisper, that the mere act of writing had begun to heal her, that the connection forged through these letters was a lifeline that pulled her from the depths of isolation. In her words, there was a palpable mix of fear and exhilaration, a trepidation born of past disappointments, yet an undeniable excitement at the prospect of something genuine and transformative. The exchange was not merely a correspondence. It was the beginning of a dialogue between two souls who had, against all odds, found a reason to believe in the possibility of love and change. Amid these tender revelations, the reader could sense an undercurrent of destiny, a subtle, almost imperceptible force that hinted at the intertwining of lives in ways that neither Sarah nor Tom could fully comprehend at the time. The letters were like breadcrumbs, leading through the vast, uncharted terrain of the West, guiding Sarah toward a future where the wounds of her past might finally be soothed by the warmth of human connection. In Tom's sincere words, she began to see the outlines of a destiny that was both unexpected and deeply alluring. The cinematic quality of their unfolding relationship was accentuated by the stark contrasts between their worlds. On one side was the bustling, shadowed urbanity of Boston, a place where life moved in a relentless, unforgiving rhythm, where dreams often died in the glare of harsh reality. On the other side lay the boundless, open expanse of the West, a realm where every sunrise promised a fresh start, and every star-strewn night whispered of untold possibilities. Through the exchange of letters, Sarah caught glimpses of this alternative existence, one where the harshness of life was tempered by the simple, unadorned beauty of nature and the resilient spirit of those who dared to dream. Tom's letters were more than just messages on paper. They were cinematic vignettes that captured the essence of life on the frontier. He described the sound of cattle lowing across a golden pasture, the delicate interplay of light and shadow as the sun dipped behind rugged peaks, and the quiet moments of reflection that came when one was alone with the vastness of the land. Each description was imbued with a sense of immediacy, as if the reader were standing right there beside him, feeling the cool breeze and witnessing the raw beauty of the western landscape firsthand. Through these vivid depictions, Sarah began to sense that her destiny might be far greater than the narrow confines of her life in Boston. The letters ignited in her a yearning to explore the unknown, to leave behind the stifling memories of loss, and to step into a world where every moment was charged with the promise of renewal. With every carefully crafted sentence, Tom's words dissolved the barriers of fear and resignation that had long held her captive. Slowly but surely, she started to believe that she, too, could belong to this world. A world where the harsh realities of the past could give way to the soft, transformative glow of hope. The initial correspondence between Sarah and Tom laid the foundation for a deeper connection, a bond forged through shared pain, tentative optimism, and the belief that even in the most desolate landscapes, love could bloom. Their letters became a silent conversation across distance and time, a testament to the resilience of the human spirit and the inexorable pull of fate. In the quiet exchange of thoughts and emotions, the promise of a new destiny began to take shape, a destiny where the echoes of the past would gradually be replaced by the vibrant chorus of a future filled with possibility. In this unfolding narrative, the Dean family emerged not merely as a backdrop for Sarah's transformation, but as living, breathing characters whose joys and sorrows resonated with the timeless rhythms of the frontier. Their story, with all its imperfections and hidden fractures, was one of survival, hope, and the relentless pursuit of a better tomorrow. And as Sarah read Tom's words, she could not help but feel that her own journey was inextricably linked with theirs, a shared destiny that beckoned her toward a future as vast and unpredictable as the western sky. Thus, in the silent communion of letters, as words flowed between two disparate worlds, Sarah found herself at the threshold of an entirely new life. A life where the burdens of yesterday might finally give way to the promise of tomorrow. A life where the intimate narratives of the Dean family would intertwine with her own, setting her on a path toward healing, hope, and ultimately, the rediscovery of love. As the days melted into weeks, the steady exchange of letters wove an intricate tapestry of shared dreams and tender confessions that slowly began to transform Sarah's inner world. In the quiet solitude of her modest room back in Boston, Sarah found herself eagerly anticipating each envelope that arrived, a symbol of a connection that defied the loneliness of her past. Every letter from Tom, filled with observations of the vast, tranquil West and intimate glimpses into the life of the Dean family, became a beacon of hope that sparked a subtle, yet profound change in her heart. Tom's words arrived like a soft, summer breeze, each sentence carefully crafted to reveal the simple yet powerful truths of life on the frontier. In one letter, he described how the early morning light would gently caress the rolling prairies, casting a golden glow over dew-laden fields. He wrote about the quiet majesty of the rising sun that seemed to promise a fresh start each day, a stark contrast to the claustrophobic, noisy existence Sarah had endured in the bustling city. With every word, Tom invited her to imagine a world where nature's unhurried pace could soothe even the deepest of wounds, where every moment was imbued with the possibility of renewal. Between the lines of his letters, Sarah began to sense an unspoken understanding, a silent communion of hearts reaching out across the distance. The initial spark of hope that had been kindled by that fateful Matrimonial Times ad was now evolving into a steady flame, nurtured by the intimacy of shared thoughts and feelings. As she read and reread each letter, Sarah found herself reflecting on the stark differences between her old world and the new life that Tom described. Boston, with its ceaseless clamor and perpetual rush, had always left her feeling small and insignificant. Its crowded streets and relentless pace had drained her of energy, leaving her isolated amid the masses. In contrast, the West, as portrayed in Tom's vivid imagery, was a realm of quiet vastness, where the whisper of the wind and the gentle murmur of nature provided solace and space to breathe. In the solitude of those evenings, with only the soft rustle of paper and the flickering glow of a single lamp, as her companion Sarah began to pen her own replies. Her words, at first tentative and halting, gradually grew bolder and more assured. She wrote of her memories, of the oppressive weight of her past losses, and of the yearning to feel the touch of hope again. Every sentence was a small act of rebellion against a life that had once seemed irrevocably marred by despair. There was an electric thrill in revealing her vulnerabilities, of sharing with a stranger the secret corners of her heart that she had long kept hidden. In doing so, Sarah felt the fragile walls of her solitude begin to crumble, replaced by a quiet, burgeoning belief that perhaps she, too, could embrace a future defined by love and possibility. Tom's responses were equally sincere, each letter echoing with warmth and gentle encouragement. He often closed his letters with questions that lingered in the air, little cliffhangers that left Sarah both eager and anxious for the next correspondence. "Do you ever feel," one letter read, "that the stars whisper secrets of a destiny yet to unfold? I wonder if you've ever caught a glimpse of what might be, if you dare to dream beyond the confines of today." Such lines resonated deeply with Sarah, igniting a restless curiosity within her and urging her to look beyond the worn pages of her past. The anticipation of what might come next, the promise of a new chapter waiting just beyond the horizon of each letter, began to replace the feelings of resignation that had once defined her. Within this quiet dialogue, Sarah's internal landscape underwent a dramatic transformation. Where she had once harbored deep-seated self-doubt and resignation, there now grew a tentative hope, a belief that her life need not be defined solely by loss and loneliness. The raw honesty of her exchanges with Tom revealed a side of herself that had long lain dormant, the part that dared to dream of a life filled with beauty, connection, and genuine affection. As her heart opened up through each carefully chosen word, the city's harsh memories began to recede, replaced by the gentle cadence of a new beginning. In one particularly poignant letter, Tom described a moment when he sat alone on the porch of the Dean homestead, watching the sky morph from the soft blush of dawn to the full brilliance of day. In that quiet hour, he wrote, I felt the weight of my own solitude, yet I also sensed the promise of something greater. It was as if every ray of sunlight carried with it the assurance that the darkness of night would eventually give way to a brighter tomorrow. Sarah read those words with trembling eyes, feeling as though they were speaking directly to the chambers of her heart. For the first time in years, she dared to imagine a future where the darkness that had once seemed so all-encompassing might be replaced by light. The correspondence was not without its moments of poignant tension. There were nights when the vulnerability of her disclosures left Sarah exposed and trembling, unsure if her honesty would be met with understanding or indifference. Yet, each time she confided her deepest fears and aspirations, Tom's thoughtful and compassionate responses reaffirmed her worth. In these exchanges, a delicate, almost imperceptible thread of fate began to weave their lives together. Every shared secret, every tender reassurance, acted as a small stitch in the fabric of a connection that promised to transcend the physical distance between them. As the letters accumulated, Sarah's inner monologue shifted from one of cautious reserve to a bold yearning for transformation. The bustling noise of Boston, with its unyielding pace and ceaseless demands, had long served as a reminder of everything that had been lost. Now, however, the memories of that frenetic life were tempered by the soft, reflective cadence of the West, a place where the simplicity of nature and the steady rhythm of life allowed for a deeper connection to oneself and others. The contrast was stark. The relentless clamor of the city had always drowned out her inner voice, leaving her feeling invisible and unheard. But in the written word, she found a medium that not only acknowledged her pain, but celebrated her capacity for hope. In the silent communion of letters, Sarah discovered that love was not the grand, overwhelming force she had once feared it to be. Instead, it was a series of small, measured moments, a shared laugh over a simple observation, a quiet acknowledgement of shared suffering, a hopeful question that dared to imagine a brighter tomorrow. With each letter, the heavy cloak of self-doubt that had long defined her existence was slowly replaced by a newfound confidence, a belief that she was deserving of love, of connection, and of a future that could rise from the ashes of her past. The narrative of her transformation was as cinematic as it was deeply personal. In her mind's eye, she saw herself stepping out of the darkened alleys of Boston into a world bathed in the soft, forgiving light of the West. It was as if the ink on each page had the power to dissolve the cold, relentless boundaries of her previous life, paving the way for a future filled with promise. The gentle interplay of shadows and light in Tom's descriptions painted vivid pictures in her imagination. Images of sunlit meadows, endless skies, and a quiet sense of belonging that had eluded her for so long. Through the written word, Sarah's soul began to sing a different tune, a melody of resilience, hope, and a quiet, unyielding determination to reclaim the joy that had been stolen from her. The correspondence was no longer just an exchange of words. It was a lifeline, a tangible reminder that even the most desolate heart could be mended by the simple act of reaching out. In those letters, she found not only the seeds of a future filled with potential, but also the courage to embrace a destiny that, until now, had seemed almost too beautiful to believe. And so, with each passing day, as she delicately unfurled each new letter from Tom, Sarah felt herself inch closer to a future that was both unknown and exhilarating. The cold, cacophonous memories of Boston gradually gave way to the gentle promise of the West, a promise that whispered of new beginnings, of a life reimagined and reborn. In the quiet spaces between words and in the heartfelt pauses that punctuated their exchanges, Sarah discovered a truth that had long been obscured by the shadows of her past. That love, in all its quiet, unassuming splendor, was not something to be feared or dismissed, but a gentle, persistent force capable of lighting the darkest corners of the soul. Thus, as the dialogue between their letters deepened, the world around Sarah began to shift in subtle yet profound ways. The noise of the city receded into a distant echo, replaced by the soft, measured heartbeat of a life rediscovered. With every carefully penned word and every tender reflection shared, the transformation of her spirit became increasingly undeniable, a metamorphosis from the depths of despair to the luminous promise of a tomorrow replete with hope, connection, and the quiet assurance that she was not alone. The once harmonious rhythm of life at the Dean Ranch began to falter beneath the relentless pressure of hidden secrets and unresolved resentments. What had once seemed like a carefully orchestrated symphony of rugged resilience and familial unity was now showing faint, yet unmistakable signs of dissonance. In the early hours of a crisp, foreboding morning, when the sky was painted in streaks of cold gray and the horizon appeared ominously still, Sarah first noticed that something was amiss. It started with the cattle. Sarah had always taken a quiet pleasure in counting the herd each week, a ritual that once brought her solace as she observed the dependable cycles of nature. But recently, the numbers weren't adding up. Despite the usual births and natural attrition, there were unexplained discrepancies, missing heads that defied logic and careful record-keeping. As she reviewed the ranch's ledgers late one evening, the flickering lamplight revealed more than just arithmetic errors. It suggested a pattern of covert losses that set her heart pounding with suspicion. The quiet murmur of the ranch at night had given way to a strained silence. Conversations that once carried gentle teasing and earnest hope now faltered when the subject of herd management was raised. Sarah noticed furtive glances exchanged between certain members of the family, hushed conversations that halted as soon as she drew near. The warm, inviting laughter that usually filled the rustic dining hall had been replaced by whispered tones and sidelong looks. There was an undercurrent of tension that no one could quite name, yet every instinct told her that something was deeply wrong. During one particularly unsettling afternoon, as the wind howled through the barren fields and the sun struggled to break through a thick curtain of clouds, Sarah witnessed an odd scene near the north pasture. A group of ranch hands, faces partially hidden by the frayed edges of their hats, were huddled together in a corner. Their furtive behavior and the way they kept glancing around nervously struck her as unusual, even for a place accustomed to hard labor and the harsh realities of frontier life. She moved closer, her heart thumping in a mix of concern and determination. What initially had been a routine inspection now felt charged with an unspoken urgency, a moment when everything might change. The conversation among the workers was inaudible, but their body language spoke volumes. One man, his eyes darting with anxiety, subtly slipped a small bundle of papers into the folds of his weathered jacket before hastily dispersing to join others scattered across the property. Sarah's pulse quickened. Had this been a covert meeting? Was someone orchestrating the disappearance of cattle or falsifying the ranch records for their own gain? The questions swirled like the dust on the parched earth, each one adding a layer of foreboding to an already tense atmosphere. That evening, as twilight descended and the ranch was bathed in the eerie glow of a blood-red sunset, Sarah's suspicions began to solidify. She could not shake the feeling that the ranch, which had once promised the simplicity and honesty of frontier life, was concealing a darker reality. Her thoughts turned to the internal dynamics of the Dean family. The very bonds that had once been a source of strength now appeared fraught with hidden rivalries and unspoken ambitions. Subtle hints in conversations, the occasional slip of a tongue during family gatherings, and even the way certain siblings avoided eye contact when discussing financial matters, all of it formed a mosaic of potential betrayal. In the hushed moments after dinner, when the clamor of daily tasks had subsided, Sarah sat alone on the creaking wooden steps of the porch. The sky overhead was a tumult of darkening clouds, the first drops of rain falling softly as if in mourning for the broken trust that now permeated the air. The sound of distant thunder mingled with the rustling of dry leaves, composing a natural symphony of unease that resonated with the turmoil in her heart. As she gazed out over the sprawling land, her mind replayed snippets of overheard conversations and fleeting expressions of guilt that she had observed among the family members. There was a subtle shift in the way Tom, who had once been the steady, reassuring presence in every letter, now conducted himself. His letters had grown less frequent, and, when they did arrive, carried an undercurrent of tension that hinted at unresolved issues on the ranch. Tom's once bright descriptions of the dawn on the plains were now tinged with a note of resignation, as if he too was beginning to sense that the idyllic frontier life was cracking at its seams. Sarah couldn't help but wonder if the challenges they now faced were the prelude to something far more sinister, a betrayal that could tear the family apart and shatter the fragile hope that had begun to blossom in her heart. As days turned into restless nights, the ranch began to take on a cinematic quality that was as beautiful as it was foreboding. The rolling fields, usually bathed in the gentle light of the west, now seemed to be draped in shadows. The majestic mountains in the distance, once symbols of hope and endless possibility, appeared as silent, watchful sentinels guarding secrets, too heavy to reveal. In the midst of this natural splendor, the discord among the family members played out like a well-rehearsed tragedy, each act building toward an inevitable climax. Sarah's internal monologue grew louder with each passing day. Her once tentative belief in the possibility of a better future was now intermingled with a growing dread, a sense that the foundation of the ranch, and perhaps her own emerging dreams, were in jeopardy. In private moments, when she allowed her guard to fall, she contemplated the possibility that the anomalies in the cattle count were not mere mistakes, but deliberate acts of deceit. Could someone within the family be orchestrating a scheme to siphon off the ranch's wealth, or worse, undermine the very legacy that had been built on the sweat and determination of generations? The tension reached its apex one late afternoon, when the sky was set ablaze with the dying embers of a once hopeful sun. Sarah had just finished her weekly inspection of the grazing fields, when she noticed a commotion near the storage barn. A cluster of figures was gathered in a tight circle, their voices raised in hushed urgency. Drawing closer, she could hear snippets of conversation, a mention of missing cattle, a furtive reference to covering up discrepancies, and most chilling of all, the name of one of the younger brothers, whose involvement had never before been suspect. Her heart pounded as she realized that the situation was escalating far beyond petty disagreements or benign misunderstandings. The familiar rhythm of ranch life was being disrupted by the undercurrent of greed and betrayal. In that charged moment, the ranch transformed from a symbol of hard-won freedom into a battleground where trust would be tested and loyalties might be torn asunder. Back on the porch that evening, as the storm clouds gathered and the first heavy drops began to fall, Sarah's mind raced with thoughts of what could be unfolding behind closed doors. She thought of the quiet nights when the family gathered to share stories and dreams, a time when the western landscape seemed to promise unity and the healing power of nature. Now, that same landscape was cast in a grim light, its beauty juxtaposed with the dark possibilities of treachery. The once comforting hum of the cattle, the rhythmic clip-clop of hooves on dusty trails, and the gentle murmur of family conversation were now overlaid with a dissonant note of suspicion and unease. The cinematic nature of these moments was not lost on Sarah. In her mind, she could almost hear a dramatic score rising in the background, a deep, resonant melody punctuated by the sudden staccato notes of tension. It was as if the very elements conspired to heighten the drama of the unfolding conflict. Every flash of lightning across the darkened sky, every low rumble of thunder, served as a visual and auditory metaphor for the impending storm that threatened to upend the fragile balance of the ranch. In the quiet aftermath of that turbulent day, Sarah resolved to keep her observations to herself for the time being, though the seed of distrust had been firmly planted in her heart. She began to monitor the interactions among the family with a keener eye. Each furtive glance, every hushed conversation, and the subtle shifts in body language became clues that she carefully catalogued in her thoughts. The more she observed, the more she sensed that the internal discord was not confined to a single moment. It was an undercurrent that had been building for some time, fueled by long-held grudges and unmet expectations. In the following days, as the storm passed and the skies cleared to reveal a cold, unyielding blue, the ranch settled into an uneasy calm. But beneath the surface, the tension remained palpable, a pressure that could explode at any moment. Sarah's heart, which had begun to heal through the warmth of her correspondence with Tom and the promise of a brighter future, now throbbed with a complex mixture of hope and trepidation. The dream of renewal was now intertwined with the dark possibility of betrayal, a duality that lent an even greater depth to the narrative of her life. Every evening, as she sat by the window watching the fading light, Sarah couldn't help but replay the events of the day in her mind. The images were as vivid as they were disturbing. The furtive movements near the pasture, the whispered conspiracies in the barn, and the stark expressions of guilt that occasionally flickered across a familiar face. It was a tableau that spoke of hidden struggles, a struggle for power, survival, and perhaps redemption. In those reflective moments, the contrast between the clamor of her former life in Boston and the stark, often brutal reality of the West became painfully clear. The noisy, suffocating city had offered its own kind of chaos, a relentless barrage of stimuli that left little room for introspection. Here, in the quiet expanse of the ranch, every sound, every pause, and every gesture was magnified. The silence that stretched across the fields was not a comforting void, but a canvas upon which the stark truths of life were projected. And in that projection, Sarah saw not only the beauty of an unspoiled wilderness, but also the shadow of human frailty. Thus, as the days passed and the undercurrents of deceit grew louder, Sarah found herself at a crossroads. The correspondence that had once been a lifeline of hope was now interwoven with a sense of foreboding. The Dean family, once a beacon of potential and new beginnings, now harbored secrets that threatened to shatter the fragile bonds they had built. In the midst of this turmoil, Sarah's internal struggle intensified. She was caught between the desire to believe in the promise of a new life and the nagging suspicion that the very foundation of that life was compromised. With every passing moment, the ranch's true nature unfolded before her eyes in cinematic detail. A grand, sweeping drama where every ray of sunlight was tempered by the shadow of betrayal, and every gentle breeze carried with it the whispers of a conflict yet to erupt. The stage was being set for a confrontation that would challenge the very core of the family's unity, and Sarah, with her heart both fragile and resolute, could only watch as the seeds of discord began to germinate in the once pristine soil of the Dean homestead. In this charged atmosphere, the anticipation of what was to come hung heavy in the air, a promise of change that was as inevitable as the rising sun over the endless plains. The cinematic score of her life, once a tender melody of hope, now built to a dramatic crescendo, as if heralding the arrival of a storm that would forever alter the course of her destiny. And as Sarah braced herself for the inevitable clash, she knew that the journey she had embarked upon, a journey that had begun with the faint glow of a long-forgotten hope, was now on the precipice of a dramatic, life-altering revelation. In the interplay between light and shadow, truth and deception, the ranch's future was being rewritten, and as Sarah's gaze swept over the vast, unsettled landscape, she silently vowed to uncover the mysteries that threatened to tear apart the fragile tapestry of trust. The calm before the storm was a delicate, dangerous lull, and within it lay the promise of an explosive transformation, a transformation that would force every member of the Dean family, and Sarah herself, to confront the darker sides of ambition, loyalty, and human frailty. Thus, under the vast western sky, where every whisper of the wind and every echo of the past converged in a singular moment of impending change, Sarah found herself standing on the edge of a new, uncertain future. The signs of instability had been laid bare, and the seeds of conflict were poised to take root. The journey that had begun with a glimmer of hope was now evolving into a high-stakes narrative of betrayal, resilience, and the unyielding pursuit of truth. A narrative that would soon shatter the quiet facade of the Dean Ranch and expose the raw, unvarnished reality of life on the frontier. The once steady cadence of life on the Dean Ranch had given way to a mounting tension that pulsed like a storm on the horizon. As the sun dipped behind a line of rugged mountains, casting long shadows over the homestead, the simmering conflict among the siblings began to boil over into overt confrontation. The atmosphere, heavy with unspoken resentments, was punctuated by heated exchanges that revealed not only the raw fractures in the family, but also the dark undercurrents of betrayal that threatened to unravel everything. In the dim light of dusk, the gathering at the ranch's worn wooden dining table felt more like a tribunal than a family meal. Tom, usually the quiet mediator, had remained mostly silent, his gaze fixed on the fading light. But the tension was impossible to ignore. Jack, the sharp-tongued second eldest, had grown increasingly defensive and aggressive in recent weeks. His eyes, once warm and familiar, now burned with an intensity that unsettled even those who loved him dearly. During one such evening, as the family settled into their routine, an argument erupted over the discrepancies in the herd count, a subject that had become a dangerous taboo. Jack slammed his fist on the table, sending a set of cutlery clattering to the floor. "I'm telling you," he growled, his voice rough with anger. "There's nothing wrong with the numbers. You're all just making mountains out of molehills." Ben, usually the quietest of the brothers, couldn't hold back any longer. "Jack, stop deflecting. We all know something isn't right. The records don't add up and we're losing cattle by the dozen. How do you explain that?" His tone was low and measured, yet edged with a quiet fury that hinted at deeper betrayals. Jack's eyes flashed dangerously. "I'm doing what I must to keep this ranch afloat," he retorted, leaning forward so that his face came within inches of Ben's. "Maybe if some of you stopped snooping around and questioning my methods, we wouldn't be in this mess." His words hung in the air, bitter and accusatory, leaving a heavy silence in their wake. The argument, though brief, crackled with a cinematic intensity, the kind that makes the viewer's heart race, knowing that the fragile unity of a family is on the brink of collapse. The other family members exchanged uneasy glances. Their eyes darted between Jack and Ben, silently pleading for calm as old wounds reopened and rivalries that had long been suppressed began to resurface. Amid the chaos, Sarah, who had been quietly observing from the fringes of the room, felt her pulse accelerate. The cacophony of harsh voices, the biting exchange of accusations, and the cold tension in the air all resonated with a personal ache. In that moment, she realized that the serenity she had once imagined in this rugged frontier was a facade, a brittle veneer masking a deeper rot. Her heart ached at the thought that the bonds of loyalty and love within this family were being corroded by greed, ambition, and long-buried resentments. Before anyone could interject, the door to the dining room burst open with a violent creak, and in that sudden, jarring moment, a pall of foreboding swept over the room. Tom, the steady and compassionate pillar of the family, staggered into the room. His usually calm demeanor was replaced by a look of sheer panic, his eyes wide and unfocused as if he'd seen something unspeakable. "Tom!" cried Molly, her voice trembling as she rushed to his side. "What happened? Are you all right?" Tom's words were few and halting as he tried to catch his breath. I was out by the north pasture, trailing the herd," he managed, his voice a ragged whisper. "I heard a noise, a terrible crushing sound. Then everything went black." The room fell deathly silent. For a moment, the only sound was the heavy, ragged breathing of Tom and the muted, almost imperceptible crackle of the fire in the hearth. Jack's face softened for an instant, the anger melting away into horror. Ben's eyes clouded with a mix of anger and sorrow. It was as if the earlier conflict had evaporated, replaced by a collective unspoken dread of what Tom's condition might mean for them all. Sarah, too, felt a cold, shattering blow to her heart. Tom, whose letters had carried the gentle promise of hope and renewal, was now vulnerable, a man brought low by a mysterious accident. In that fragile moment, she saw not just a father figure for the family, but also the last beacon of integrity that had, until now, kept the darkness at bay. The prospect of losing him, of having that light extinguished, was almost too painful to contemplate. Within the next hour, frantic activity ensued. The family gathered around Tom, who was now slumped in a creaking armchair, his face pale under the flickering lamplight. Molly cradled his hand, while Ben and Jack exchanged glances that spoke volumes. Anger, guilt, and fear mingled in a silent communication that cut deeper than any harsh word. Tom's condition, though not immediately fatal, was grave. A deep gash along his temple, evidence of a heavy blow, marred his otherwise stoic features. It was clear that he had been in a serious accident, one that could have easily claimed his life if not for some miraculous twist of fate. Yet the pain etched into his eyes, and the tremor in his voice, betrayed the true cost of this moment. The tragedy of his near-fatal encounter loomed large over the family, a harbinger of the changes that were coming. "Someone must have been there," Ben said, his voice low and resolute, as he gently squeezed Tom's hand. "This wasn't an accident. I can feel it. There's something more behind it." Jack's expression hardened once again, though now it was laced with a palpable tension that surpassed earlier outbursts. "Don't start with that nonsense," he snapped. But even as he spoke, his eyes betrayed a flicker of uncertainty. The argument that had so violently erupted only moments before now paled in comparison to the gravity of the situation at hand. Sarah listened, her mind racing as she pieced together the fragments of overheard conversations and furtive glances. Had the financial discrepancies, the covert meetings, and the hushed accusations been the prelude to this catastrophe? Was Tom's injury the inevitable consequence of internal treachery? A sacrificial blow meant to silence those who dared to expose the cracks in their crumbling facade? As the evening wore on, the atmosphere became increasingly charged with both physical pain and emotional turmoil. Tom was carefully tended to in a quiet corner of the ranch house, his condition stabilized by the efforts of the family. Yet the emotional cost was immense. In the flickering shadows of the lamplight, whispered speculations and accusatory murmurs began to circulate. It was as if Tom's tragedy had become a catalyst for revealing long-concealed truths, setting the stage for a confrontation that would shatter the fragile equilibrium of the Dean family. Later that night, while the family tried to settle into an uneasy calm, Sarah found herself unable to sleep. Restless and haunted by visions of what had transpired, she slipped out into the cool night air. The western sky, now a deep indigo punctured by distant stars, offered little solace. Instead, it seemed to mirror the tumult in her heart, a vast, unyielding expanse of darkness punctuated by flickers of uncertain light. In the solitude of the night, Sarah's thoughts turned inward. She recalled Tom's last letter, the one in which he had hinted at an impending challenge, a challenge that now, in the wake of his accident, felt more ominous than ever. What had he known? Who among the family, hidden behind friendly smiles and shared memories, had harbored ambitions so dark as to endanger not only their livelihood, but also the very life of the man who had once been their guiding light? The rustle of the wind through the dry grass, the distant call of a night bird, and the rhythmic tapping of her own heartbeat formed a dissonant symphony that accompanied her solitary walk around the ranch. Every shadow seemed to hide a secret. Every whisper of the wind carried the weight of unspoken confessions. In that quiet, charged atmosphere, Sarah vowed to uncover the truth behind the sudden violence that had upended their lives. Not just for the sake of the family's future, but for her own. a future that now depended on the delicate balance between hope and the harsh realities of betrayal. By dawn, as the first pale light crept over the horizon, and the chill of the night gave way to a tentative morning warmth, the consequences of that fateful evening had begun to crystallize. The once unified front of the Dean family was now irrevocably fractured. The tension between the brothers, particularly the unsettling behavior of Jack, was no longer something that could be swept aside with a few harsh words. It was a deep-seated conflict that threatened to tear apart the very fabric of their existence on the ranch. Sarah, standing silently in the wake of these revelations, felt both shock and a strange, unbidden resolve. The painful turn of events, Tom's near-fatal accident, the bitter arguments, the whisper of betrayal, had pushed her to a precipice. The world she had once imagined as a place of redemption and new beginnings was now tainted by the reality of human frailty and hidden agendas. Yet, even as despair threatened to reclaim her, a new determination took root. She realized that if she was to build a future, she could not do so on a foundation of lies and unchallenged deceptions. In the quiet aftermath of that turbulent night, as the ranch slowly stirred with the subdued energy of a new day, Sarah silently promised herself that she would seek the truth, no matter how painful it might be. The storm that had engulfed the Dean family was far from over, and the path ahead was shrouded in uncertainty. But for Sarah, the journey had reached a critical turning point, a moment when the exposed vulnerabilities and unspoken conflicts would either lead to a complete collapse or force a transformation that might yet redeem the fractured legacy of the ranch. And so, beneath the vast, indifferent sky of the West, the stage was set for a confrontation that would redefine the destiny of the Dean family. In that charged silence before the inevitable clash, every heartbeat echoed with the promise of revelation and the quiet determination of a young woman ready to face the dark truths of the world, and perhaps to find a new light amid the ruins of betrayal. The world seemed to hold its breath on that fateful day, as if time itself had slowed to a crawl. In the waning light of an autumn afternoon, the ranch was cloaked in a hushed melancholy, a prelude to the tragedy that was about to shatter the fragile balance of the Dean family. Sarah, who had already borne the weight of burgeoning suspicions and mounting tensions, found herself standing in the midst of a scene that would forever alter the course of her life. It began with a sudden, horrifying cry from the far end of the property. The sound, muffled by distance yet piercing in its urgency, sent shivers down Sarah's spine. She dropped the letter she had been reading and rushed toward the source of the commotion. As she neared the north pasture, a slow-motion montage of events flashed through her mind: the swirling dust, the frantic gestures of the ranch hands, and then Tom. There he was, sprawled on the ground, his face contorted in pain and shock. His eyes, which had once shone with a steady, reassuring light, now stared blankly at the darkening sky. Time seemed to decelerate as Sarah knelt beside him. The once robust man, whose every letter had conveyed a quiet strength and a deep connection to the land, was now broken. His breath was shallow, each inhalation a struggle, and his hand trembled as it clutched at the dirt beneath him. In that surreal moment, every detail was magnified. The way the wind stirred the fallen leaves around them, the almost imperceptible crack in the wooden fence in the background, and the anguished look in Tom's eyes that mirrored a soul on the verge of slipping away. A single tear rolled down Sarah's cheek as she reached out, her voice barely a whisper. "Tom, please hold on." The words, laden with desperate hope, were swallowed by the oppressive silence that had settled over the scene. In the background, the muted rustle of a storm beginning to form added an eerie soundtrack to the tragedy unfolding before her eyes. She could almost see the world in slow motion. The shock on the faces of the onlookers, the quiet, resigned sigh of the wind, and the steady, relentless pulse of her own heart echoing the profound sense of loss. Despite every frantic effort to save him, it soon became evident that Tom's condition was irretrievable. In the hours that followed, as the family gathered around him with heavy hearts and trembling hands, Tom slipped away from the world that had once been his home. The news of his passing fell like a shroud over the Dean homestead, blanketing it in sorrow and disbelief. The corridors of the ranch, once filled with the clamor of daily life and the gentle camaraderie of a family united by common purpose, were now silent and heavy with mourning. For Sarah, the loss of Tom was more than the death of a man. It was the shattering of a symbol, a beacon of hope, guidance, and quiet resilience that had helped steady her during her darkest hours. In the days that followed, the grief was all-encompassing. She found herself wandering through the ranch, in a daze, every familiar sight now tinged with the bitter aftertaste of sorrow. The slow-motion moments of the past replayed in her mind. Tom's warm smile, his thoughtful words in the letters, the way he had seemed to understand her unspoken pain. Now those memories were painful reminders of what had been lost. In the quiet aftermath of the tragedy, Sarah's grief took on a dual nature. It was a raw, unfiltered pain that threatened to overwhelm her, yet beneath that despair, a strange sense of liberation began to stir. The old hopes, those fragile dreams that had once been tethered to a man who was now gone, began to crumble, making way for a new, uncertain possibility. In the space where Tom's steady presence had once reigned, a tender, almost imperceptible shift began to take shape. It was during one of those long, tear-filled nights, as Sarah sat by the window watching the stars flicker through the vast, western sky, that she first felt the stirrings of something unexpected. Ben, one of the quieter yet ever-present figures in the Dean family, had been a constant, gentle presence in the background, a supportive word here, a subtle touch there. Now, in the wake of Tom's death, Ben's steady kindness took on an even deeper resonance. His eyes, usually calm and introspective, now held a warmth and a concern that seemed to reach out to her, offering solace in a language beyond words. One chilly evening, when the ranch was draped in a fragile calm after the storm of loss, Ben found Sarah alone in the small sitting room. The soft light of a dying fire cast long, wavering shadows across the worn wooden floor. He approached quietly, as if wary of disturbing the delicate shell of her sorrow. "Sarah," he began, his voice low and sincere. "I know there's nothing I can say to ease your pain, but I want you to know you're not alone in this." She looked up, startled, by the gentle intensity in his gaze, a gaze that, in that moment, seemed to pierce through the layers of grief that had built up around her heart. I don't know how to carry on without him," she admitted, her voice a fragile tremor in the stillness of the room. Ben sat beside her, their shoulders almost touching in a quiet act of solidarity. Tom was a strong man, and he believed in the future of this ranch. "I believe he would want us to keep moving forward, to find a way to live with hope even after such loss," he said, each word measured and imbued with quiet conviction. As he spoke, Sarah felt an unfamiliar warmth radiate from him, a gentle reassurance that began to fill the emptiness inside her. It was as though, in the midst of unbearable sorrow, a seed of something new was being planted, one that held the promise of healing and perhaps, in time, even love. In the days that followed, the slow and uncertain process of grief began to yield moments of unexpected connection between Sarah and Ben. Their conversations, which at first were tentative and halting, gradually blossomed into deep, heartfelt exchanges. In the quiet moments, they shared, whether while tending to small tasks around the ranch or during the rare, peaceful intervals when the family gathered to remember Tom. There was a sense of intimacy that transcended words. Ben's gentle humor, his quiet support, and his unwavering presence became a lifeline for Sarah, a reminder that even in the face of devastating loss, life had the capacity to surprise her with its resilience. In one particularly moving exchange, as the autumn chill deepened and the leaves whispered of inevitable change, Ben handed Sarah a letter. "I've been writing," he said softly, his eyes searching hers for a sign of understanding. Not just to keep you company, but because I needed to put my thoughts on paper. I hope you'll read it, and maybe we can find some comfort in these words together. With trembling fingers, Sarah unfolded the letter. As she read, the words seemed to resonate with every unspoken emotion that had long been buried within her. Ben wrote of his own struggles with loss, of the deep scars left by a life that had known both love and hardship. But more than that, he wrote of hope, a cautious, tentative hope that, despite everything, there was a future worth reaching for. The language of his letter was simple yet profound, filled with moments of reflective clarity that made Sarah's heart ache and swell. At the same time, "I know we stand at the edge of a vast unknown," he wrote, "and the pain of yesterday is a weight we must carry. But I believe that if we allow ourselves to feel, to remember, and to love again, we might just find that the future holds more than we ever imagined." In that moment, as Sarah clutched the letter close to her chest, she felt a stirring deep within, a fragile, tentative connection to a man who, like her, had learned to find light in the darkness. As weeks turned into months, the once insurmountable barrier of grief began to yield, replaced by a slow, enduring process of healing. The ranch, scarred by the events that had unfolded, started to echo with a new kind of rhythm, a rhythm in which the legacy of Tom's unwavering strength would live on, not as a monument to what was lost, but as a foundation upon which a new future could be built. And at the heart of that emerging future was the quiet bond between Sarah and Ben, a bond forged in the crucible of shared sorrow and nurtured by every small, tender moment of mutual care. There were instances when Sarah, wandering the vast, wind-swept fields at dusk, would catch a glimpse of Ben's silhouette against the fading light. In those fleeting moments, she would feel a strange mix of gratitude and hope, a recognition that, though the past was irrevocably altered by tragedy, the future still held the possibility of new beginnings. Their eyes would meet briefly, conveying an unspoken promise that together they might face whatever challenges lay ahead. This delicate evolution of their relationship was not without its own inner turmoil. Sarah grappled with feelings of guilt and confusion. The memory of Tom, so deeply woven into the fabric of her heart, was ever present, and she often wondered if embracing these new emotions might somehow betray the legacy of the man who had once been her guiding light. Yet as the days passed and the seasons shifted, she began to understand that the heart is vast enough to hold multiple layers of love, each distinct, each precious in its own way. In the quiet sanctuary of their growing intimacy, Sarah learned that love, even when born out of tragedy, could be a powerful force for healing. It was a force that did not erase the past, but rather honored it by allowing the future to unfold with tenderness and care. Ben's presence, gentle and unwavering, became a constant reminder that life's most profound transformations often emerge from the ashes of loss. Every shared smile, every tender word exchanged in the quiet corners of the ranch, was a testament to the resilience of the human spirit. Thus, amid the heartbreak and the painful farewell to the man who had once embodied hope for so many, a new chapter was quietly being written. In the silence that followed Tom's death, Sarah found herself at the threshold of a profound transformation, one that would carry her from the depths of despair toward a future imbued with the promise of love and renewal. The echoes of Tom's legacy would forever linger in the corridors of the ranch, a reminder of what had been and what could still be achieved, even as the seeds of a new, fragile connection between Sarah and Ben took root. In the interplay of grief and hope, of loss and the emergence of a new bond, Sarah's journey had reached a pivotal turning point. The tragic departure of Tom, a man whose life had been the anchor of the Dean family, had irrevocably altered the landscape of her heart. And yet, in the quiet aftermath of that profound loss, the tender beginnings of a relationship with Ben offered a glimpse of redemption, a chance to rebuild, to reimagine a future where love could mend the deepest wounds. Under the vast, indifferent sky of the West, with the memory of Tom etched into every familiar corner of the ranch, Sarah slowly began to embrace the possibility that even in the wake of devastating loss, life could still surprise her. The heart, she discovered, is resilient, capable of holding sorrow and joy, grief and hope, in an intricate, ever-evolving dance. And so, as the sun rose over the scarred yet hopeful landscape, Sarah took her first tentative steps toward a new destiny. A destiny shaped by the enduring power of love, even when that love emerged from the shadows of loss. In the quiet aftermath of sorrow, the ranch began to stir with the tentative pulse of renewal. As winter's chill slowly yielded to the soft promise of spring, Sarah found herself embarking on an arduous journey of healing. A journey that would not only mend her shattered heart, but also reawaken her long-dormant belief in love. Every day on the ranch became both a battleground and a sanctuary, where the scars of the past were confronted head-on, and the hope for a better future was nurtured in the gentle rhythms of daily life. In the early light of morning, Sarah would rise before the sun, stepping outside into the cool, dewy air with a determination that surprised even her. The expansive fields, once silent witnesses to the tragedy that had befallen her family, now seemed to murmur soft encouragement as the day began. With each careful step along the weathered dirt paths, she sought not only to reclaim the space that had once been alien and intimidating, but also to find solace in the familiarity of nature's steady cycle. Her routine slowly took on a meditative quality. She began tending to the small vegetable garden that lay beside the barn, her hands working the soil with a focused tenderness. In the gentle act of nurturing new life, she found a metaphor for her own recovery. The fragile seedlings, vulnerable, yet filled with potential, reminded her that every loss could pave the way for renewal. Each bud that unfurled its delicate petals was a quiet testament to resilience, a silent promise that even after the harshest winter, life would emerge anew. Ben, too, became an integral part of this healing process. No longer merely a supportive presence in the background, he gradually stepped forward as both a friend and a confidant. Their shared moments, often simple and unadorned, grew into a tapestry of mutual care. Whether they were mending a broken fence, hauling feed for the animals, or simply sitting together on the porch as the sun dipped low behind the mountains, Ben's steady companionship offered Sarah a comforting counterbalance to her turbulent emotions. One soft afternoon, as the ranch basked in the gentle warmth of a spring sun, Sarah and Ben found themselves alone in the modest kitchen, preparing a simple meal. The air was filled with the rich aroma of freshly baked bread and simmering stew, a humble yet heartfelt celebration of life's small joys. Ben, wiping his hands on a well-worn towel, looked up with a quiet smile. "I've noticed you've been spending a lot of time out in the fields lately," he said gently, the concern in his voice a soft caress against the lingering pain of loss. Sarah paused, her eyes momentarily reflecting both gratitude and inner conflict. "I'm trying to rebuild something, piece by piece," she replied, her tone a mixture of resolve and vulnerability. "I think the earth has a way of healing us if we let it, but sometimes I wonder if I'm just digging up old hurts." Ben's gaze softened further as he reached across the table to gently squeeze her hand. "We all carry scars, Sarah. What matters is that we allow ourselves the time to heal. And sometimes, healing comes in the form of new beginnings. I see it in you every day." His words, simple yet profound, resonated deeply with her, stirring a hope that had been dormant for far too long. Even as the days passed, Sarah's internal conflict remained palpable. At night, when the ranch was enveloped in a profound silence, punctuated only by the distant call of nocturnal creatures, she would often lie awake, her thoughts adrift in memories of a past she could not entirely escape. In these quiet hours, the faces of those she had lost, especially Tom, would appear in the flickering shadows of her mind. Yet, amid the bittersweet recollections, there emerged a growing realization. While the memories would forever be a part of her, they need not dictate her future. In one particularly reflective conversation, Sarah confided in Molly, a gentle soul whose quiet wisdom had guided the family through many storms. Over cups of steaming herbal tea, Sarah admitted, "Sometimes I feel guilty, like by allowing myself to feel hope for something new, I'm somehow betraying the memory of Tom." Her voice trembled with the weight of unspoken remorse. Molly reached across the table and rested a comforting hand over hers. Losing someone we love doesn't mean we have to lock away our hearts forever. Tom's legacy, his strength, lives on in you and in every act of kindness you share. Embracing a new love doesn't erase his memory. It honors it by showing that even in the face of loss, life can still flourish. These words, spoken with gentle conviction, began to chip away at the fortress of sorrow that Sarah had so carefully constructed around her heart. In the quiet solitude of those long nights, as she reread the letters exchanged with Ben, each word laced with a tender sincerity, she slowly started to accept that the path to healing required both remembrance and the courage to embrace the unknown. As the weeks turned into months, the subtle transformation in Sarah became evident, not only in her words, but in her actions. The once tentative steps she took along the ranch now carried a confident grace, as if she were reclaiming her place in the world with each careful stride. In the shared labor of rebuilding the homestead, she found moments of deep connection. With Ben, whose gentle humor and steady presence brought laughter back into the daily rhythm of ranch life. Their conversations, often punctuated by bursts of genuine mirth amid the routine chores, wove a new narrative, a story not of unrelenting grief, but of quiet resilience and the promise of a future reimagined. There were moments when Sarah caught herself smiling unexpectedly, a sound so rare in the recent past that it felt almost miraculous. In one instance, as they repaired a creaking barn door together under the clear blue sky, Ben remarked, "I think this door has seen more storms than we ever will." Sarah laughed softly, the sound mingling with the creaks and groans of the old wood, and for a fleeting moment, the weight of her loss seemed to lift just a little. Yet, the journey toward rebuilding trust was not without its inner battles. There were times when memories of Boston, the crowded, impersonal city that had once left her feeling invisible, would surge back, threatening to drag her into the familiar depths of despair. In these moments, the contrast between the frenetic noise of her former life and the serene, open expanse of the ranch became a source of both pain and solace. The relentless clamor of the city had once drowned out her inner voice. But here, in the quiet beauty of the West, that voice was emerging, tentative yet determined. During one late afternoon walk through a sun-dappled meadow, Sarah found herself musing aloud as she strolled alongside Ben. "Sometimes, I wonder if I was meant to be lost in the chaos of the city forever. But now, with all of this quiet, I feel like I'm finally beginning to understand what it means to truly live." Ben looked at her with eyes that held both understanding and gentle encouragement. "The past shapes us, but it doesn't have to confine us," he replied softly. "You're discovering a new way to be, one that honors who you were while embracing who you can become." Their dialogue, rich with introspection and the subtle poetry of everyday life, laid the foundation for a burgeoning relationship built on mutual respect and understanding. Sarah's inner monologue, once dominated by the heavy echoes of loss, now found space for dreams and the soft promise of new beginnings. With every shared smile, every quiet moment of vulnerability, she felt the icy grip of past sorrows thaw, replaced by a tentative warmth that began to fill the void. In the stillness of a crisp, clear night, as the first stars began to appear over the endless horizon, Sarah sat on the porch with Ben. The silence between them was not empty, but filled with an unspoken promise. A promise that even in the wake of great loss, the heart could learn to trust again. "I used to think that hope was a luxury I couldn't afford," Sarah confessed softly, her eyes tracing the constellations above. "But now, I see that hope is what makes us human. It's the spark that keeps us moving forward, even when everything seems so dark." Ben's response was measured and sincere. Hope isn't about forgetting the past. It's about building a future that respects what was and embraces what can be. "I believe you're capable of great things, Sarah. And I'm here, every step of the way, if you'll let me." In that tender exchange, the seeds of a deep and abiding connection were sown, a bond that would serve as both a refuge and a foundation for the new life they were beginning to construct together. Over time, as the ranch healed and the scars of tragedy began to fade into the background, Sarah's transformation became increasingly visible. Her laughter, once stifled by grief, now rang out softly amid the rustle of the wind and the gentle hum of daily chores. The ranch, too, seemed to resonate with this renewed spirit, its once tense atmosphere giving way to moments of serene harmony. Yet, the process of recovery was ongoing, a delicate balance between remembrance and renewal. There were days when Sarah's heart would ache with the memory of what was lost, only to be soothed by the comforting presence of Ben or the simple beauty of a sunrise over the vast western landscape. These moments, both painful and precious, became the stepping stones toward a future defined not by absence, but by the promise of what could still be built. Through it all, the quiet resilience of the human spirit shone through. The healing that began on that cold, lonely ranch was a testament to the capacity for renewal that lies within each of us. In the interplay of shadow and light, sorrow and hope, Sarah learned that trust, once shattered, could be rebuilt, piece by piece, through acts of kindness, honest dialogue, and the unwavering belief that love could, indeed, rise again. In the gentle cadence of daily life on the ranch, with its rustic charm and unpretentious rhythms, Sarah and Ben discovered that the journey toward rebuilding trust was as much about the small moments as it was about grand declarations. It was found in the shared laughter over a simple meal, in the quiet support offered during long, contemplative walks, and in the delicate, unspoken understanding that, together, they could face the uncertainties of tomorrow. Thus, as the days grew longer and the ranch blossomed anew with the promise of spring, Sarah embraced the process of healing. The once paralyzing weight of grief gradually gave way to a quiet, enduring faith. A faith that the future, though uncertain, held the potential for joy, connection, and the kind of love that could transform even the deepest wounds. And in that transformation, amidst the gentle murmur of a revitalized world, a new chapter of her life began. One defined by hope, resilience, and the delicate, powerful trust that now bound her and Ben together on the vast, ever-changing canvas of the West. As winter slowly loosened its icy grip and hints of spring emerged on the horizon, the Dean Ranch began to heal, not just physically but emotionally as well. In the wake of tumultuous events and lingering suspicions, the family found themselves gathering around a common purpose, rebuilding their home and reweaving the bonds that had once held them together. Under the vast expanse of the western sky, the ranch transformed into a living canvas of resilience and hope. Every morning, as the first rays of sunlight crept over rugged mountains and bathed the sprawling fields in a soft, golden glow, the family rose together. It wasn't a grand ceremony, but a quiet ritual born of necessity and the shared determination to push forward. The clatter of boots on weathered wood and the steady hum of early work filled the air. The siblings, once divided by bitter disputes, now labored side by side, mending broken fences, repairing dilapidated barns, and tending to the cattle with a sense of renewed purpose. Their voices, once raised in sharp arguments, were now interspersed with moments of laughter and gentle teasing, a tender reminder of days when the ranch was not merely a battleground, but a sanctuary of familial love. In one vivid cinematic sequence, The camera might pan slowly across a dewy field where the brothers, hands calloused and hearts determined, work in unison. The scene shifts to show a close-up of Molly's weathered hands smoothing over a splintered beam, while Jack, with an earnest glimmer in his eyes that was new to him, collaborates quietly with Ben to tighten the loose hinges of the main door. Overhead, the sky stretches wide and clear, a metaphor for the fresh beginnings that now lay before them. These simple acts of restoration were not just physical repairs. They were symbolic of a deeper healing taking place within each member of the family. Amid this collective effort, Sarah's journey of recovery and her burgeoning bond with Ben took on a life of its own. Their relationship, once tentative and shadowed by grief, now blossomed naturally amid the daily rhythms of ranch life. One late afternoon, as the sun dipped low and cast long, dramatic shadows across the yard, Sarah found herself sitting on the edge of an old wooden bench with Ben. They watched as the sky transformed into a riot of colors, deep oranges melting into soft purples, the horizon aglow with a promise of tomorrow. Ben broke the silence gently. "It's moments like these that remind me why we keep fighting, why we keep building, because there's beauty even after the storm." His voice was soft yet resonant, each word laced with sincerity and a quiet assurance that warmed Sarah's heart. Sarah's eyes shone with a mixture of wonder and cautious hope. "I never imagined I'd see the day when I'd feel this peaceful. It feels like every new sunrise is a promise that the past doesn't have to define us," she replied, her voice trembling slightly, as if it carried the weight of both loss and the potential for a brighter future. Their conversation was punctuated by long silences that spoke volumes, silences filled with mutual understanding and a connection that went far beyond words. In the intimacy of that shared moment, Sarah realized that the bonds of family extended beyond the immediate circle of kin. They were part of something greater, a community built on shared struggles, triumphs, and the courage to face each day anew. The unity of the Dean family was no longer just about repairing the ranch. It was about rebuilding lives, mending broken hearts, and creating a future where hope could flourish. That evening, as the family gathered for a humble dinner under the flickering light of oil lamps, the atmosphere was transformed. The clinking of cutlery and the soft murmur of conversation were interwoven with moments of heartfelt reminiscing. An older cousin recalled tales of ancestors who had journeyed across vast frontiers, their determination etched into every stone of the homestead. A younger sibling, with eyes wide in admiration, spoke of dreams that mirrored the very spirit of the West. In these moments, every word felt like a brushstroke painting a picture of resilience, a testament to the enduring strength of the human spirit. Between courses, Sarah and Ben exchanged glances that hinted at a silent understanding. Their eyes, shimmering with the reflection of candlelight, communicated the promise of a new beginning, a promise that was tender, fragile, yet undeniably real. Ben's hand found Sarah's across the table, a gesture that bridged the gap between shared sorrow and a future ripe with possibility. It was a moment of quiet intimacy that resonated with every heart present, a reminder that even amidst the scars of loss, life could weave together threads of compassion and love. Later that night, when the household finally retreated into a rare, peaceful quiet, Sarah sat on the back porch wrapped in a soft blanket. The cool night air was filled with the gentle rustle of leaves and the distant murmur of the countryside. In the silence, she allowed herself to reflect on the transformation that had taken root within her. The sharp edges of grief, though still present, were softening into memories. Memories that honored the past but did not imprison her. With each breath, she felt a growing sense of inner strength, nurtured by the closeness of her family and the unexpected warmth of Ben's unwavering support. In one particularly moving scene, Sarah recalled a conversation from earlier that week with Ben as they walked along a narrow, winding trail behind the barn. The path was lined with wildflowers that nodded gently in the breeze, and the fading light created a tapestry of soft golden hues on the ground. "Sometimes," Ben had said, pausing to look at her intently, I wonder if we're like these flowers, battered by the storms of life, yet somehow managing to bloom again every spring. His words had resonated deeply with Sarah, stirring a feeling that perhaps, despite everything, she too could find a way to blossom once more. The memory of that conversation lingered like a cherished melody, its gentle refrain echoing in her heart as she slowly began to rebuild the foundations of her own trust in love. The internal conflicts Sarah faced were not easily dismissed. At times, the shadows of her past whispered doubts, questioning whether the budding warmth between her and Ben could ever truly overcome the grief that had once defined her. During one late-night conversation with her closest friend in the family, a thoughtful sister who had quietly borne witness to Sarah's struggles, she confided, "There are moments when I feel torn, like I'm caught between honoring what I've lost and daring to love again. It's as if my heart is divided between the memory of Tom and the promise I see in Ben's eyes." The friend, her expression gentle yet resolute, replied, "Loving again doesn't diminish what you've lost. It adds another layer to who you are. Tom will always be part of you, but so will the capacity to feel joy, to experience love's healing power. Trust that your heart is big enough for both." These conversations, fraught with vulnerability and raw emotion, paved the way for Sarah's gradual acceptance of a future that was not defined solely by sorrow. Slowly, her internal monologue began to shift. No longer was she solely a captive of the past, but an active participant in the creation of a new narrative. Every day brought small victories: a shared laugh with Ben during a quiet moment in the barn, the warmth of a gentle touch, or the simple pleasure of watching the ranch come alive with the promise of spring. Each of these moments was a step toward reclaiming a part of herself that she had long thought lost. The cinematic moments of family unity became the backdrop for this personal transformation. In one particularly memorable sequence, the family gathered to celebrate the completion of repairs on a long-neglected barn. The camera might have panned slowly across smiling faces, capturing the interplay of light and shadow as the evening sun bathed the scene in a soft, amber glow. In that tableau, every member of the Dean family shone with the quiet determination of those who had weathered storms and emerged stronger. Laughter echoed through the open space, a joyous chorus that affirmed life's ability to endure despite hardship. Amid the celebrations, Sarah found herself drawn closer to Ben, their connection deepening with each shared glance and whispered word of encouragement. As the days blended into a hopeful mosaic of rebuilding and rediscovery, the sense of familial unity became palpable. The once fractured bonds, now slowly knitting together through shared effort and mutual support, promised a future where the scars of the past might finally be healed. The collective resilience of the Dean family, embodied in every restored plank of wood and every gentle conversation by the fire, set the stage for a bright, promising future. In that environment, Sarah's heart, once encased in layers of grief, began to open, allowing the tender, steady warmth of love to seep in. By the close of this chapter in their journey, the ranch was no longer merely a backdrop for survival. It had become a testament to hope, unity, and the transformative power of shared love. The story of the Dean family was being rewritten with every act of kindness and every moment of honest dialogue, a story that promised not only the rebuilding of a homestead, but also the flourishing of a resilient, hopeful future for everyone within its embrace. And at the heart of this transformation, the gentle, unspoken bond between Sarah and Ben stood as a beacon, a promise that even amidst life's deepest sorrows, new love could blossom, nurturing the seeds of tomorrow. The long, arduous journey had finally led to a moment that shimmered with the promise of renewal. A wedding day that was at once grand in its emotion and simple in its honesty. Under the wide, endless western sky, the Dean homestead had been transformed into a haven of hope and love. Early that morning, as the horizon blushed with the first hints of sunrise, family and friends gathered in a clearing beside the ranch. There, amidst wildflowers swaying in the gentle breeze and a backdrop of rugged mountains, Sarah and Ben were to unite their lives in marriage. The ceremony was an elegant tapestry woven from the threads of the past and the promise of the future. A simple wooden arch, lovingly decorated with locally gathered blossoms and delicate greenery, framed the couple. Beneath it, the soft hum of a string quartet, playing melodies that resonated with both sorrow and joy, set the tone for a celebration that was both cinematic and intimately personal. As guests took their places on mismatched, lovingly restored wooden chairs, the atmosphere brimmed with anticipation and a sense of profound togetherness. Sarah appeared at the end of the aisle like a vision of gentle strength and radiant hope. Her dress, a graceful blend of lace and soft linen, fluttered in the cool morning air, catching the light in a way that evoked the delicate beauty of new beginnings. Every step she took was measured and sure, her eyes glistening not with tears of sorrow, but with the joy of a future being reborn. Among the gathered faces, the expressions of the Dean family shone with a mix of solemn remembrance and exuberant pride. They had weathered storms together, and today they celebrated not only the union of two hearts, but also the resurgence of their collective spirit. Ben, standing beneath the arch with an expression of quiet determination and tenderness, was the embodiment of hope restored. His eyes, steady and compassionate, locked with Sarah's as they exchanged vows that were simple yet profound. Their words, carried by soft voices that spoke of shared dreams and newfound courage, echoed across the field and mingled with the gentle murmur of nature. "I promise," Ben began, his voice resonating with both vulnerability and resolve, "to honor the memory of our past, to cherish every moment of our present, and to build a future together that is filled with kindness, understanding, and unwavering love." Sarah's reply was a tender affirmation of her own transformation. "I stand here today, having learned that love can be reborn from the deepest sorrow, and I choose you, Ben, as the partner who will walk with me into every tomorrow." In that moment, time itself seemed to slow. The camera of the mind captured every detail: the soft rustle of the wind through the golden fields, the gentle cadence of the music, the radiant smiles of those gathered, and the raw, unguarded emotion on Sarah and Ben's faces. The ceremony was marked by silent, poignant pauses, each one a reminder of the long, winding road they had traveled. The memory of Tom, whose passing had been both a devastating blow and a catalyst for transformation, was honored quietly in the heartfelt glances exchanged among the family. His legacy, woven into the very fabric of the ranch, and in the tender recollections of each letter and conversation, now became a silent benediction on this day of renewal. After the vows were spoken, a delicate moment of unity ensued. Family members approached the couple to bestow blessings, a gentle touch on the hand, a whispered word of hope, a soft embrace that said, "You are not alone." The air was filled with the mingling of voices and the sweet aroma of wildflowers, as if nature itself had come to witness and celebrate this new chapter. Children danced at the edge of the gathering, their laughter echoing like silver bells and adding a light, playful counterpoint to the solemnity of the vows. It was a scene that was both cinematic in its grandeur and deeply personal, reflecting the essence of a community reborn from adversity. As the ceremony concluded, the reception unfolded in the shade of an ancient oak tree, its gnarled branches stretching out like protective arms. There, under soft lantern light and a sky studded with stars, the celebration continued with heartfelt toasts, gentle music, and stories of old and new. Each tale recounted not only the hardships that had been overcome, but also the collective triumph of a family that had learned to find beauty in imperfection. In one memorable toast, the eldest of the siblings spoke, "Today we celebrate not just the joining of two souls, but the resilient spirit of our family. May the love you share be as steadfast as these mountains, as gentle as the prairie winds, and as enduring as the legacy of those who came before us." Later, as the night deepened and a soft, reflective calm settled over the gathering, Sarah found a quiet moment with Ben on the veranda. They sat side by side, the warm glow of the lanterns mingling with the cool whisper of the night. The distant sound of a fiddle and soft laughter created a symphony of contentment, and in that moment, Sarah's heart was full. "I never thought I could feel so alive," she confessed quietly, her hand resting on Ben's. "Losing so much. It shattered me, but today I feel whole again. I feel like every painful memory has led me here, to you, to this moment." Ben's response was a gentle squeeze of her hand, his eyes reflecting both gratitude and promise. "Your strength is what inspires me, Sarah. Together, we'll build a future that honors our past and lights the way to new dreams." The epilogue of their journey, one that began in the icy, desolate streets of Boston and traversed the vast, untamed landscapes of the West, was a story of profound transformation. In the weeks and months that followed the wedding, the Dean Ranch blossomed into a symbol of renewal and unity. With each sunrise, the family found new ways to honor their legacy while embracing the promise of tomorrow. The challenges of the past, though never forgotten, became the fertile soil from which hope and love grew resiliently. Sarah and Ben, now united in a partnership built on shared grief and emerging hope, dedicated themselves to not only restoring the ranch but also cultivating a life enriched by the lessons of their journey. They introduced small traditions, a monthly gathering where stories of loss and triumph were shared, a ritual of planting a tree in honor of those they had lost, and quiet evenings spent under the stars, discussing dreams for the future. Every act, there was an unspoken belief that the scars of the past were not marks of defeat, but reminders of the strength that had carried them forward. The future of the Dean family, once marred by internal strife and hidden betrayals, began to shine with the brilliance of a collective rebirth. The ranch, now thriving under the careful stewardship of a united family, was a testament to the power of resilience and the enduring capacity for love to mend even the deepest wounds. Neighbors and friends, drawn by the story of the Dean family's transformation, began to visit more often, their presence adding to the tapestry of hope that now defined the homestead. As the seasons changed and the ranch flourished under the vast, open skies of the West, a quiet but unyielding message resonated throughout. Life, in all its trials and tribulations, had the power to evolve. Every loss, every moment of despair, was but a precursor to the beauty of a new beginning. Sarah's journey, from the cold, isolating streets of Boston to the warm, embracing heart of the West, was a powerful reminder that the human spirit, when nurtured by hope and genuine connection, can overcome even the darkest of nights. In you, the final reflection of this long, winding tale, the legacy of the past mingled seamlessly with the promise of the future. The memory of Tom, a man whose life had set the stage for so much change, was honored in quiet moments of reflection and in the steadfast dedication of a family united by love. And for Sarah and Ben, their wedding day was not an ending but a vibrant new beginning, a shining beacon of what can emerge when hope is allowed to take root in even the most unlikely of hearts. As the closing notes of their journey faded into the gentle embrace of the western night, the camera of life pulled back to reveal a panorama of endless possibilities. The Dean family, with its scars and its triumphs, stood as a testament to the transformative power of love, trust, and unity. And in that ever-expanding horizon, the promise of tomorrow gleamed like the first light of dawn, soft, steady, and filled with the profound certainty that, despite everything, the future is always ripe with hope.